Tamin stood at the observation deck of the orbital station and watched the ships arrive. His three-fingered hands gripped the railing as vessel after vessel docked with the military platform. The Velthoran officer had seen many species in his 15 cycles of service, but he had never worked directly with humans before. The station hummed with activity as the coalition forces assembled. Representatives from 6 different species moved through the corridors, preparing for the joint operation against the Krell threat. Tamin's people, the Velthorans, were known throughout the galaxy as master tacticians. They calculated every risk and never committed to battle without overwhelming odds in their favor. Survival was their highest virtue. The human contingent arrived last. Tamin watched their transport ship slide into dock with more speed than seemed wise. Even their docking procedures felt reckless to him. When the airlock opened, a wave of noise flooded the quiet station. The humans were talking, laughing, and making loud sounds that seemed to serve no tactical purpose. Commander Hyosung led the human forces. He was a broad-shouldered man with scars visible on his neck and hands. His dark eyes swept the docking bay with the intensity of a predator. Behind him walked Lieutenant Jiwoo, a smaller woman whose easy smile somehow made Tamin more nervous than Hyosung's serious expression. The first briefing was a disaster from Tamin's perspective. The coalition commanders gathered in the strategy room to discuss deployment patterns for the frontier defense. The Velthorans proposed a layered retreat strategy with multiple fallback positions. The Centauri delegation suggested automated defense platforms. The Real wanted to negotiate. Then Hyosung spoke. We hold the line at the colony perimeter. No retreat. No fallback positions. We dig in and we hold. Tamin's translator chip must have malfunctioned. He checked it twice. No, the human had actually suggested a static defense with no escape route. This violated every principle of Velthoran tactical doctrine. Commander, Tamin said carefully, what is your contingency if the enemy forces prove too numerous? Hyosung looked at him with those dark, intense eyes. Then we call for reinforcements and hold longer. And if reinforcements cannot arrive in time, then we hold until they do. The logic made no sense. Tamin filed this away as something to investigate further. Over the next few days, Tamin observed the humans during their training exercises. He had been assigned to work as a liaison with their forces, coordinating between Velthoran intelligence and human tactical operations. What he saw during those days disturbed him deeply. The humans trained in conditions that would have violated Velthoran safety protocols. They ran mock battles with live ammunition flying close enough to wound. They practiced medical evacuations under simulated fire. Most disturbingly, they spent hours drilling one specific scenario over and over again, retrieving wounded soldiers from hostile territory. Tae-min watched from a safe observation post as Seung-hee, one of their medics, sprinted across an open field while training drones fired stun rounds around her. She reached a wounded soldier, grabbed him by his equipment harness, and dragged him back to cover. Then she went back for another. And another. Why does she keep returning? Tamin asked Ji-woo, who stood beside him reviewing the drill performance. Because there are still people out there, Ji-woo said, as if this explained everything. But she could be hit. The risk increases with each attempt. Ji-woo turned to look at him with that same smile that made his skin itch. Yeah, that's why we practice it so much. The first real test came 3 days later. A Krell scout force probed the outer defenses of the mining colony on Arcturus 7. It was a minor engagement by most standards. Only about 30 Krell warriors against a mixed patrol of humans and Vel-Tar-A and Tae-min was monitoring communications when the call came in. 2 soldiers were down, 1 human and 1 Velthoran. The Krell were advancing. Velthoran protocol was clear. The mobile units should withdraw and let the fixed defenses handle the enemy while medical drones retrieved the wounded. The humans did not follow Veltharan protocol. Hyosung was on the scene in minutes with a full squad. Taemin watched through the drone feeds as the humans formed a defensive perimeter around the wounded. They poured fire into the Krell positions, while Sung-hee worked on the injuries. The Krell could have disengaged. The humans could have withdrawn. Instead, both sides committed fully to a fight over 2 wounded soldiers and 30 meters of worthless rocky ground. The humans won. They always seemed to win, but they lost 3 more wounded in the process of saving the first 2. From a Veltharan perspective, they had taken a minor problem and made it 5 times worse. Tae-min filed his report that evening. He wrote about the inefficient human tactics and their emotional approach to warfare. He noted their unwillingness to make calculated sacrifices for the greater good. He recommended that Veltharan forces maintain independent command structures to avoid being drawn into human-style quagmire battles. But that night, as he tried to sleep, he kept thinking about something he had seen. When the fighting was over and the wounded were being loaded onto transport, Hyosung had stayed with them. The human commander had not slept in almost 40 hours by that point. His command duties were complete. He could have rested. Instead, he sat with each wounded soldier and talked to them. He held their hands. He promised them they would be okay. He stayed until every single one of them was safely on the medical ship and away. Tae-min did not include this observation in his report. He was not sure what it meant. He was not sure he wanted to know. Through his window, he could see the human section of the station. Lights still burned there, while the rest of the coalition forces slept. The humans were always awake, always moving, always preparing for the next fight. Something in Taemin's chest felt tight as he watched those lights. His people had a saying, "The wise warrior preserves himself for tomorrow's battle." The humans seemed to have a different saying, though he had not heard them speak it aloud. They seemed to believe that tomorrow's battle could wait. Today's wounded could not. The alarm woke Taemin from a shallow sleep. Red lights flashed through his quarters as the station-wide emergency broadcast began. The Krell had launched a major assault on Colony Epsilon 9, a mining outpost with 15,000 civilians. All coalition forces were being deployed immediately. Taemin grabbed his equipment and rushed to the deployment bay. Chaos filled the corridors as soldiers from 6 different species scrambled to their assigned vessels. The humans were already in their transport, engines hot and ready. Taemin had been assigned to their command ship for this operation as an observer and tactical consultant. The flight to Epsilon 9 took 2 hours. Taemin spent the time reviewing intelligence reports on the Krell swarm. They were a hive mind species that fought with pure numbers. Individual Krell were not particularly dangerous, but they attacked in waves of hundreds or thousands. They felt no fear and accepted no surrender. Standard tactical doctrine against the Krell was simple: evacuate valuable assets and deny them territory. You could not win a battle of attrition against an enemy that bred new warriors faster than you could kill them. The Veltharan approach had always been to make the cost too high and force the Krell to redirect elsewhere. Hyo-Sung had different ideas. The briefing was short. We hold the colony until every civilian is evacuated. Estimated time for full evacuation is 6 hours. We hold for 6 hours. Commander, one of the Veltharan's senior officers said through the communication link. Our tactical models suggest the Krell force size will overwhelm fixed defenses within 3 hours. Recommendation is to evacuate military forces with the civilians and deny the colony to the enemy. Recommendation noted and rejected, Hyosung said. His voice was flat and calm. We hold for 6 hours. All civilians get out. That is not negotiable. Taemin felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly the kind of emotional decision-making he had warned about in his reports They landed in the middle of a battle. The Krell had already breached the outer perimeter and were pushing toward the civilian shelters. Taemin could see them through his visor as the transport ramp dropped. Hundreds of chittering, insect-like creatures that moved in perfect synchronization with the hive mind, controlling them. The humans hit the ground running. There was no careful formation, no measured advance. They simply charged toward the heaviest fighting and started killing Krell. Taemin followed, his rifle in his hands, his tactical training screaming at him that this was wrong. Ji-woo led a squad to reinforce the eastern barricade. Taemin went with them because he had no better option. The barricade was a hastily assembled wall of mining equipment and prefabricated barriers. 20 human soldiers held it against a Krell force that Taemin estimated at over 300. The fighting was like nothing Taemin had ever experienced. The Krell came in waves, climbing over their own dead to reach the defenders. The humans met them with bullets, grenades, and when the Krell got too close, with blades and raw violence. Seung-hee was everywhere. The medic seemed to have no sense of self-preservation at all. Every time a soldier went down, she was there, dragging them back behind the barricade. Taemin watched her run out into open fire 3 times in the first hour. The 4th time, she took a Krell claw to her shoulder and kept working anyway, sealing the wound with emergency foam while still pulling a wounded soldier to safety. Fall back. Taemin shouted at her. You are injured. Fall back. She looked at him with blood running down her armor. Can't. People still need help. The battle raged for hours. Taemin's ammunition ran low, then ran out. A human soldier tossed him fresh magazines without being asked. The sun moved across the sky. The pile of dead Krell in front of the barricade grew higher. And still they came. Donghyun was one of the engineers. Taemin watched him working in the middle of combat, setting explosive charges on the support pillars of a nearby building. The Krell were advancing down that street in massive numbers. Donghyun worked with steady hands while bullets and plasma bolts filled the air around him. Get clear! Someone shouted. Donghyun kept working. Not done yet. The building is about to collapse on you. I know, that is the point. He finished the last charge and sprinted away just as the detonator clicked. The building came down across the street, creating a wall of rubble that blocked the Krell advance. Donghyun had bought them another 30 minutes. He had also been hit twice during the setup and was bleeding from his leg. At the 4-hour mark, Taemin's tactical computer updated the casualty reports. The human forces were at 38% casualties. Veltharan Doctrine demanded immediate retreat at 20%. But the humans did not retreat. They did not even slow down. Hyosung was at the front line, firing alongside his soldiers. His armor was scorched and dented. He had been fighting without rest since they landed. When a section of the line started to buckle under a Krell surge, he personally led a countercharge that drove them back. At hour 5, the civilian evacuation transports began launching. Taemin could see them rising into the sky from the colony spaceport. One after another, they climbed toward orbit carrying thousands of saved lives. The Krell seemed to sense their objectives slipping away. The attacks intensified. They threw themselves at the defenses with renewed fury. The eastern barricade fell. The humans pulled back to a secondary position and kept fighting. Ji-woo took a hit that punched through her armor and into her side. She went down hard. Taemin was beside her in seconds, his hands shaking as he tried to remember human first aid procedures. But Seung-hee was already there, her wounded shoulder not slowing her down at all. I got her, the medic said. Stay on the line. Taemin stayed. He fired until his weapon overheated. He fought because the humans around him were fighting, and somehow their refusal to quit became his refusal to quit. At hour 6, the last civilian transport cleared the atmosphere. All civilians evacuated, the communication channel announced. Military personnel are cleared to withdraw. Withdraw by squads, Hyosung ordered. Covering fire. No one left behind. The retreat was orderly, but it cost them. The Krell pursued aggressively. More humans fell. Every single time, someone went back for them. Every single time, they refused to leave anyone on that battlefield. Tae-min helped carry Ji-woo to the transport. She was conscious but pale from blood loss. She still managed to smile at him. "Not bad," she whispered. "For your first real fight with us." The transport lifted off. Below them, the colony was overrun with Krell. They had lost the territory. But every single civilian had escaped. And every single soldier, living or dead, was accounted for. The human casualties were at 42%. By Velthoran standards, it was a catastrophic defeat. By human standards, it was a victory because they had achieved their objective. Tae-min sat in the transport bay, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. Soon-hee was in the medical section, finally getting her own wounds treated. Dong-hyeon was in surgery. Ji-woo would recover, but needed weeks of rehabilitation. They had won. The cost was terrible. And somehow, looking at the exhausted faces of the human soldiers around him, Tae-min knew they would do it again tomorrow if needed. That thought terrified him more than the Krell ever could. The intelligence came from a captured Krell node creature. After days of analysis by the Coalition's best xenobiologists, they had extracted the location of a hive node deep in Krell-controlled space. Destroying it could disrupt Krell coordination across 3 entire sectors and save millions of lives. It was obviously a trap. Tae-min said as much during the mission briefing. Every tactical analysis pointed to the same conclusion. The information was too easy to obtain. The target was too valuable. The location was too exposed. His people had a saying, "The bait that glitters brightest hides the sharpest hook." Could be a trap, Ji-woo agreed. She had recovered from her wounds at Epsilon 9 and was back on active duty. Probably is a trap. And why are we proceeding? Tae-min asked. Because if it is not a trap, we save 3 sectors. And if it is a trap, we spring it now on our terms instead of theirs later. The human logic made Tae-min's head hurt. They knew it was dangerous and proceeded anyway. This was the kind of thinking that resulted in 40% casualties. The strike team was small by necessity. 12 humans, 3 Veltherans, including Tae-min, 2 Centauri tech specialists, and 1 Uriel observer. They would take a fast insertion ship, hit the target hard, and extract before the Krell could respond in force. That was the plan. Ji-woo commanded the ground team. Her second in command was a human soldier named Jae-hyun, a quiet man who seemed to communicate mostly through nods and hand signals. The team also included Min Seo, their fighter pilot, who would provide air support and extraction. They dropped into the target zone at dawn. The hive node was located in a canyon system on a dead moon. The insertion was clean. The approach was textbook. Everything went perfectly. That was when Tae-min knew for certain it was a trap. They reached the hive node without encountering resistance. It sat in the center of a dried riverbed, a massive organic structure pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. The tech specialists began planting charges while the soldiers formed a defensive perimeter. "This is wrong," Tae-min said to Ji-woo. "Where are the defenders?" "Yeah," she said, scanning the canyon walls. "I am thinking the same thing." The charges were set. The team began moving toward the extraction point. That was when the canyon walls came alive. Krell poured out of hidden tunnels by the hundreds. They had been waiting in the rock itself, perfectly still, perfectly patient. The hive mind had sacrificed the node as bait, and the strike team had walked right into its jaws. Contact on all sides. Someone shouted. The communication channel exploded with calls for fire support. requests for ammunition, and status updates. Taemin's tactical displays showed red markers surrounding their position in a complete circle. The estimated enemy force was over 500 Krell. They had 21 soldiers. The extraction point is blocked, Mincio reported from her fighter circling overhead. I count at least 200 Krell between you and the landing zone. Beltheran protocol was absolutely clear in this situation. The team should scatter, each soldier seeking individual escape and evasion routes. Some would die, but some would survive. It was the mathematically optimal solution. Form up, Ji-woo shouted. Tight defensive formation. We move as a unit. They were going to die together. Taemin saw it with perfect clarity. The humans were choosing group death over individual survival chances, but he formed up with them anyway. His body moved before his mind could object. The fighting was immediate and brutal. The Krell came in waves, their chittering voices creating a horrible chorus that echoed off the canyon walls. The humans met them with concentrated fire, but there were simply too many targets. Jae-hyun took the first serious hit. A Krell warrior broke through the defensive line, and its blade arm punched through his armor into his chest. He went down hard. 3 humans immediately moved to protect him. They formed a living shield around his body, while Soon-hee worked to stop the bleeding. This left gaps in the defensive line. More Krell poured through those gaps. Leave him, Taemin shouted. Maintain the perimeter. No one listened to him. The team fought their way forward, carrying Jae-hyun on a makeshift stretcher. They advanced 50 meters in 20 minutes. Each meter cost them blood and ammunition. Taemin's tactical computer kept updating the probability of survival. It dropped from 12% to 8% to 5%. Mincio's voice crackled over the communication channel. I am coming in for a gun run. Mark your position with smoke. Negative, Ji-woo said. Too many Krell on our position. You will hit us. Then I will fly very carefully. The fighter screamed overhead, its cannons tearing into the Krell formations. Mincio made 3 passes, each one closer than the last. On the 4th pass, her fighter took a hit from a Krell bioweapon. Taemin watched through his visor as her aircraft started trailing smoke. I am hit, Mincio said calmly. Port engine is gone. Starboard engine is failing. Get clear and eject, Ji-woo ordered. Negative. I can still fly. And you still need air support. Her fighter was dying. She had maybe 2 minutes before total engine failure. She could eject now and have a chance at survival. Instead, she lined up for another attack. Tae-min watched her fighter dive toward the largest Krell formation. She fired everything she had left: cannons, missiles, and emergency flares. Then, as her engines gave out completely, she guided her crippled aircraft directly into the center of the enemy mass. The explosion carved a hole in the Krell. Line! Go! Ji-woo screamed. Move now! They ran through the gap Mincio had created with her life. Taemin's legs burned. His lungs ached. He helped carry Jae-hyun's stretcher, even though every instinct told him to drop it and run faster. The extraction point was still 300 meters away when Youngmi spoke up. She was their communications specialist, a small woman who had barely said 10 words during the entire mission. Someone needs to call in fire support, she said, and someone needs to stay in position to guide it. Everyone knew what that meant. Calling fire support from their current position meant standing exposed on high ground where the Krell could see you. It meant certain death. I will do it, Youngmi said before anyone could volunteer. Negative, Ji-woo said. We move together. Not this time, Lieutenant. Youngmi was already moving toward a rock outcropping that overlooked the canyon. Get them out. I will buy you the time you need. She started calling in coordinates while the team ran. Taemin could hear her voice in his helmet, calm and professional. reading off targeting data to the orbital support ships. He could also hear the Krell finding her position. "Fire mission complete," Young-Mi said. "Rounds incoming in 30 seconds. You should start running faster." The last thing Taman heard from her was laughter as the Krell swarm reached her position. The artillery strike hit like the hand of an angry god. The canyon floor erupted in fire and shrapnel. The Krell formation shattered. The strike team made it to the extraction ship with 8 seconds to spare. 13 of them had gone down. 18 came back up. They had lost Minzio and Young-Mi. Jae-hyun was critical but alive. Everyone else was wounded to some degree. Tae-min sat in the extraction ship and tried to understand what he had witnessed. By every logical measure, the mission was a failure. They had lost 2 soldiers and failed to destroy the hive node. The tactical computer rated it as a complete disaster, but Jiwoo was smiling through her tears. The other humans were quiet but not defeated. They had gone into certain death, and most of them had come out. From their perspective, that was a victory. Tae-min realized something that made his blood run cold. He had stayed. When every instinct screamed at him to run, to save himself, to follow Veltheran protocol, he had stayed with the humans. He had helped carry Jae-hyun. He had run through Minseo's sacrifice. He had listened to Young-Mi die so the rest of them could live. And some part of him, some small part that terrified him, understood why they did it. The humans did not fight to preserve themselves. They fought to preserve each other. That was the most horrifying thing Taemin had ever learned. Taemin could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Minseo's fighter diving into the Krell formation. He heard Young-Mi's laughter in his final moments. He felt the weight of Jae-hyun's stretcher in his hands. The medical staff said he was experiencing trauma. They offered him medication to help him rest. He refused. Sleep felt like a betrayal of the humans who would never wake up again. On the 3rd day after the failed mission, a message appeared on his personal terminal. It was from Eunji, the human psychological counselor attached to the coalition forces. She requested a meeting. Taemin almost deleted it, but something made him accept instead. Eunji's office was small and surprisingly comfortable. She was an older human with gray in her hair and kind eyes that seemed to see too much. She offered Taemin a seat and a cup of something warm that smelled pleasant. "You are struggling," she said. It was not a question. "I am trying to understand," Taemin said. "Your people, the way they fight, the way they die. Tell me what you saw." So he did. He told her about Epsilon 9 and the 40% casualties to save civilians. He told her about Minseo flying a dying fighter into the enemy. He told her about Young-Mi staying behind to guide artillery onto her own position. He told her about every human who had chosen death over abandoning their comrades. Eunji listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know how humans evolved?" she asked finally. Tae-min shook his head. "We are persistence hunters. On our home world, we were not the strongest or the fastest, but we could run longer than anything else. We would chase prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We never stopped. We never gave up. It is in our DNA." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's history. Images of humans running across plains, fighting wars, building civilizations. We are also pack animals, social creatures. We survived because we worked together and protected each other. A human alone dies quickly. Humans together can accomplish anything. So we evolved 2 drives that sometimes conflict. Never stop, and never abandon the pack. "That is insane," Taemin said quietly. "Yes," Eunji agreed. "From a purely logical standpoint, it is completely insane. We take irrational risks to save individuals. We fight battles we cannot win. We refuse to retreat even when retreat is the smart choice. She closed the holographic display and looked at Taemin directly. But here is what you need to understand. We do not fight to win. We fight because stopping is not in our nature. You cannot intimidate us into surrender because we do not have a surrender instinct. You cannot make us quit through attrition because we will outlast you. Every time. Without exception. Taemin thought about the Krull and Epsilon 9, throwing themselves at the human lines for 6 hours. The Krull had the numbers. They had the advantages. But the humans had simply refused to break, and eventually the Krull had lost. The galaxy fears you, he said. They should, Yoonji replied. Not because we are cruel or because we enjoy violence. They should fear us because we are inevitable. Point us at something, and we will either defeat it or die trying. Usually both. That evening, the Coalition Command Center lit up with emergency alerts. Krull forces were massing for a major offensive. Intelligence suggested they were gathering their largest fleet in decades, maybe 500 ships. The Coalition could field maybe 100. The Voltharan High Command immediately issued orders for a strategic withdrawal to the core systems. The Centauri agreed. The Rill were already packing their ships. It was the logical choice. Fall back to defensible positions and make the Krull pay for every system they took. The humans voted to attack. Tae-min attended the emergency strategy session in a state of disbelief. Hyosung stood at the front of the room, his face as calm as if he was discussing weather patterns instead of mass suicide. The Krull are gathering their fleet at the Navara system, he said. Intelligence suggests they will launch their offensive within 48 hours. We have a window to hit them while they are still organizing. With what forces? A Voltharan admiral asked. We are outnumbered 5-1. Yes, Hyosung said. That is why we should attack now. In 48 hours, we will be outnumbered 10-1. The logic was completely backwards. Attack into worse odds to avoid even worse odds later. But as Taemin listened to the plan, he realized it was not about the odds at all. The humans were not calculating victory. They were calculating cost. If they let the Krull launch their offensive, millions would die in the core systems. If they attacked now and lost, only the military forces would be destroyed. The civilians would have time to evacuate. The humans were choosing certain death to buy time for others. This is madness, Taemin said. He stood up without meaning to. You are talking about throwing away the entire coalition fleet. Hyosung looked at him. Yes, to save 50 billion civilians. Is your mathematics different than mine? My mathematics says we should preserve our forces and fight from a position of strength. And my mathematics says that 50 billion lives are worth more than 100 ships. Hyosung's voice was still calm. We can build new ships. We cannot build new people. Ji Woo stood up beside Hyosung. Her wounds from the canyon trap were still healing, but she was back on active duty. I volunteer for the assault force. I also volunteer, said Seung-hee. I volunteer, said Dong-Hyan. One by one. Every human in the room stood up and volunteered for a mission they knew was suicide. Tae-min wanted to scream at them. He wanted to explain that survival was the highest virtue, that preserving yourself meant you could fight another day, that throwing your life away accomplished nothing. But he looked at their faces and saw no fear. He saw determination and something else. Something that Yoonji's words had finally helped him understand. They were not afraid of death. They were afraid of failing each other. The meeting adjourned. The humans began preparations for their attack. Taemin walked back to his quarters in a daze. His terminal was full of messages from Voltharan Command. They were ordering all Voltharan forces to withdraw from the coalition immediately. The humans were clearly insane and could not be saved. He stared at the messages for a long time. Eun-G had said something else during their conversation, something that kept echoing in his mind. "You stood with them in the canyon," she had said. "You carried Jae-hyun even though leaving him would have been safer. You ran through Minseo's sacrifice. You listened to young me die so you could live. You already know what it means to be human. Your mind just has not accepted it yet." Taemin pulled up his personal logs and began writing a report. Not to Velthoran Command. To himself. To understand what he had learned. "Humans are not warriors," he wrote. "They are something far more terrifying. They are inevitable. They do not fight to win. They fight because stopping is not in their nature. They cannot be intimidated. They cannot be outlasted. They cannot be made to quit." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "And when they decide something is worth protecting, they will die before they let it fall. Every time. Without exception." He sent a response to Velthoran Command. It was short. "Request denied. I am staying with the humans." Then he went to find Hyosung and volunteer for the assault force. If he was going to die, he would rather die standing, with beings who knew what they were dying for than live, running away from the only people who had never asked him to be anything other than himself. The horror was not that humans were willing to die. The horror was that they made you willing to die with them. The assault fleet gathered in the shadow of a dead star. 107 ships, most of them human. Taemin stood on the bridge of the flagship and watched the tactical display. In the Navara system, 500 Krell ships waited like a swarm of angry insects. The Velthoran ships had withdrawn. The Centauri had retreated to their core worlds. The Rill had declared neutrality. Only the humans remained, and a handful of individuals from other species who had chosen to stay with them. Tae-min was one of 7 Velthorans who had refused the withdrawal order. His people would likely strip him of his rank for this. If he survived, which seemed unlikely. Hyosung addressed the fleet over the open channel. His face appeared on every screen in every ship. "We all know the odds," he said. "We are outnumbered. We will likely not survive this battle. Command has authorized a full retreat for anyone who wants to take it. There is no shame in choosing to live." He paused. No one moved. No one took the retreat option. "In that case, let me tell you what we are fighting for. Behind us are 50 billion people. Mothers and fathers, children, the old and the young. They are counting on us to buy them time to evacuate. Every minute we fight is another transport full of civilians reaching safety." Taemin felt something tighten in his chest. This was not a speech about glory or honor. This was a speech about mathematics. How many lives could be saved per minute of combat? "We are going to hit them hard and fast," Hyosung continued. "We are going to hurt them badly. And we are going to hold the line for as long as we can. That is the mission. That is all that matters." The channel closed. The fleet began its final approach. Jiwoo found Taemin in the combat preparation area. She was checking her weapons with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "You did not have to stay," she said. "I know. You could have left with your people. You could be safe right now. I know that too." She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "You are learning." The battle began at dawn, though there was no real dawn in space. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of the Krell formation. It was a violation of every safety protocol, but it gave them the element of surprise. Tae-min was manning a weapons station on the flagship. His job was to coordinate targeting data between ships. It was technical work that kept his mind busy and his hands moving. The first exchange of fire lit up. Space like a new star being born. Missiles and energy weapons crossed the void between the fleets. Ships on both sides began dying immediately. The Krell responded exactly as predicted. They swarmed the human fleet, trying to overwhelm them with numbers. But the humans had planned for this. They fought in tight formations, each ship covering its neighbors, moving like a single living organism. Tay-Min watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen. 5 ships gone in the first 10 minutes. 8 ships gone. 12 ships gone. The numbers kept climbing, but the Krell were losing ships too. And more importantly, they were not advancing toward the civilian evacuation routes. All civilian transports are away from Sector 7, a communication officer reported. Sector 8 evacuating now. Sung-hee was on one of the medical ships that stayed with the fleet. She moved from ship to ship in small shuttles, treating wounded and evacuating critical cases. Tay-Min listened to her voice on the medical channel. Always calm, always professional. Even when her shuttle took fire. At the 2-hour mark, Hyosung's ship took a direct. The flagship lost power and began drifting. Tay-Min felt the lights flicker and die around him. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, someone shouted. Engineering is gone. Hyosung's voice came over the internal communication system. All hands, this is the commander. We are still in this fight. Damage control teams to your stations. Weapons teams, keep firing. The crew responded without panic. They moved through the damaged ship like they had practiced this exact scenario 100 times. Maybe they had. Tay-Min found himself helping seal a hull breach on deck 6. He worked alongside 3 humans, using emergency foam to plug a hole where a Krell weapon had punched through the armor. Space was visible through the gap, and the air was screaming out of the ship. One of the humans, a young woman named Bora, lost her grip and started sliding toward the breach. Tay-Min grabbed her harness without thinking. Another human grabbed him. They formed a chain of bodies anchoring each other while the 4th human sealed the breach. When the hole was plugged and the pressure stabilized, Bora looked at Tay-Min and nodded. No words needed. He had done what any of them would have done. He was one of them now. The battle raged for 6 hours. The human fleet was down to 37 ships. But the Krell were in disarray. Their formation had collapsed. Their coordination was breaking down. And most importantly, the last civilian transport had just jumped to faster than light speed. All civilians are clear, the communication officer reported. The evacuation is complete. Hyosung allowed himself a small smile. Well done, everyone. Time to go home. But the Krell had other ideas. They sensed the humans were preparing to retreat and threw everything at them in one final push. The remaining human ships formed a defensive sphere and fought their way toward the jump point. Jae-hyun was back on active duty despite his injuries from the canyon trap. Tay-Min saw him on the bridge, coordinating fighter squadrons. The man moved stiffly and clearly was in pain, but he refused to stand down. Why are you here? Tay-Min asked him during a brief lull in the fighting. You could be on medical leave. Jae-hyun looked at him with surprise. My team is here. Where else would I be? It was such a simple answer. Such a human answer. The retreat took another hour of brutal fighting. They lost 8 more ships breaking through the Krell line. But when the fleet finally jumped to faster than light speed, 39 ships made it out. Tay-Min stood on the bridge of the damaged flagship and looked at the exhausted faces around him. They had lost 68 ships. Thousands of humans had died. By any objective measure, they had been destroyed as a fighting force. But 50 billion civilians were safe. The humans were celebrating, not with joy or triumph, but with quiet relief. They had done what they set out to do. The cost was terrible, but the cost had been acceptable because the alternative was worse. Ji-woo found Tay-Min again as the fleet limped toward friendly space. She looked exhausted but alive. Her smile was genuine. "You stood with us," she said, "when you could have run. When your people ordered you to run. You stood." "I did." "Why?" Taemin thought about his answer for a long time. He thought about Min Seo diving her fighter into the enemy. He thought about young Mi laughing as she died. He thought about Hyosung staying awake for 40 hours to watch over his wounded. He thought about every human who had chosen death over abandoning their comrades. "Because running would have been safer," he said finally. "But staying was right." Ji Woo nodded. "Welcome to the pack." 3 weeks later, Taemin filed his final report. It was not for Veltheran Command, who had already stripped him of his rank. It was for the Coalition Historical Archive. "I came to study human warfare," he wrote. "I wanted to understand why they fight the way they fight, why they take such terrible casualties, why they refuse to make logical decisions that would preserve their forces. I learned that humans do not fight to win. They fight because something is worth protecting. And once they decide something is worth protecting, they become something terrifying. They become inevitable. You cannot intimidate them into surrender. You cannot outlast them in a war of attrition. You cannot make them quit through fear or pain or loss. They will keep coming, keep fighting, keep dying, until either they achieve their objective or there are no more of them left to fight. The true horror of humanity is not their capacity for violence. It is their refusal to abandon each other. It is the certainty that if you stand with them, they will die before they let you fall alone." He paused, looking at the words on his screen. "I found true horror when I stood alongside humans in battle. But I also found something else. I found what it means to belong, to be part of something larger than myself, to know that no matter what happens, I will never face it alone. The humans have a saying, we fight together or we die together, but we never stand alone. I used to think this was a weakness. Now I understand it is their greatest strength. I am no longer Veltheran. I am no longer bound by the logical doctrines of my people. I am something new. I am someone who learned what it means to be human, and I would not change that for anything." Taemin closed the report and sent it to the archive. Then he went to find his team. They were gathering for another mission briefing. The war was not over. It would never be over as long as there were things worth protecting. But for the first time in his life, Taemin was not afraid. He was standing with humans, and humans never quit.